Welcome everyone to the second town hall. Uh, just going to give folks a little bit more time to join the meeting, a couple minutes, then we'll get into it. Okay, let's get this show on the road. Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Shabram, Chief Procurement Officer, and I'm the disembodied voice that is speaking to you over this PowerPoint. Eddie, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yep, I'm Eddie Roberts in the Business Affairs Office, Director of Financial Services. So AP team is part of my team, among others. So good to be here.
Thanks, Eddie. So this is the second town hall related to the Duck Depot expansion. And so we got a couple of subjects to talk about today, a little bit of additional background to recap, what this is and what we talked about in the last town hall. And then the majority of the time that we are going to spend is going through an actual live demonstration of Unimarket or Duck Depot, which is made by Unimarket as the product, but Duck Depot going through each step of the requisition to payment process for a full procure to pay process. And then after the demonstration, we'll talk a little bit more about the timeline. We'll talk about the training and support that we have available to folks as we go live, which is coming fairly soon, and what our next steps are. So just some background here, and I gave this a little bit in the last session as well, but we're doing this because we're trying to bring U of O into a more modern approach to the full procure to pay process. And what we mean by the full procure to pay process is from the point that someone is requesting something, the requisition, all the way to when the vendor is paid. Historically, our systems have been pretty outdated in that realm. Some were more modern, like the original version of Duck Depot, what we call Duck Depot Classic. Some less so, some of the banner functions and so on. And so our intent is to have one system that manages the whole vendor process from requisition all the way to payment for all purchase orders. The system's only meant to replace the current Duck Depot and then the paper POs and banner invoicing. The purchasing portal will still be there for contracts and for competitive procurements like RFPs and RFQs and so on and so forth. But the new functionalities within this system that are different from Duck Depot Classic include the non-catalog POs, right? So that replaces the paper or PDF PO or banner and the banner PO, and the invoicing functionality, which is meant to replace the banner invoicing functionality and the FOA text and all of that. And so all that data will be in one place and everyone will have visibility for the full process for the transactions that they're interacting with from the requisition, which is that request for the things, all the way to payment. So just a recap of what we talked about in session one, all of campus is going to be impacted by this because this will be the purchase order system for campus. And if you're issuing a PO under your authority, you're going to be exercising your L1 authority. Just note that with L1, we're going to bump that authority up to $25,000 for this system. And then over that, it will route to PCS for approval. If it's over 25, you won't need to submit purchase orders into the PCS portal for PCS review. The system will workflow. Yeah, that will be the way that everyone will interact with the system. Our goal was to get us up to best practices and industry standards, make a more efficient process that gave people more visibility and recorded decisions, and have one centralized system that gives us good data, right? So one of my hopes is that we can use the data and then probably find more savings within the supply chain, collective buying, all those sorts of things that are out there. This system is, I think, going to create a lot of great opportunities for automating, especially with workflows, ensuring that approvers are brought in to approve. And really the big benefits will come on the invoicing side, which we'll talk about when we get into the demonstration. And so, yeah, some things to remember, though, there are trade-offs here. In order to use the system, you'll need to have the vendor onboarded before we issue a PO or a payment. That's true for payments now, but not true for PO. So that will be a change. And right now, that process is going to remain the same for a short period of time. And then in the winter time, we'll be implementing a new vendor onboarding system to help streamline vendor onboarding with a product called PaymentWorks. That's Eddie's realm. Really, we'll talk about that more later. But yeah, so those are our goals. That's what we did before. And with that, I think we just want to jump into the demonstration. So I will let Eddie take over and start driving.
Yep, give me 1 second while I get that keyed up here. Screen. And here we go. Okay, so this is our demo version, our test version of Duck Depot, of the Unimarket platform, where we can kind of display what this will look like. I am going to be jumping through a couple users to be able to show what it looks like when you're a browser versus a buyer versus an approver. So I'm going to start with that by jumping into a user that I have here that I have set up as a browser. So I will switch over to them. So on the front page here, just this is like the general marketplace. It will populate suppliers. You can search for suppliers here if you're looking for that. If you are doing a catalog order, you will see that with these little red icons. So this is much like the Duck Depot Classic, where you'll go to their supplier site and you can select things to go into a cart, and then it will come over into the Duck Depot here where you can check out. But for what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a non-catalog order. So this would be for, something free form that you need to purchase that's not part of one of the vendor catalogs that we have available. So for this, I'm going to search for Office Depot. And I'm going to purchase a Logitech M325S wireless mouse. So you want to be descriptive with these. The idea is this is going to be an item that will ultimately be going to the vendor. So you want to make sure that they know what it is, and the buyer who's approving this and kind of pushing this through the process will understand what it is. So we'll have $20 each, and we're going to buy 10 of them. If you have additional details to add, you can add those here. Product codes, if that's something that's available for the vendor, you can add that as well. But I'll go ahead and add this to a cart without the optional details.
Eddie, I'm going to add it. Mind if I interject one thing?
Go ahead.
Just note that goods and services both can be purchased through this process. So as Eddie's adding the second line item, we're not demonstrating services today. We'll have a lot of training on that and statements of work. You can actually upload statements of work to the PO as well, but you can use this not just to buy goods, but also to purchase services as if you were doing a services PO, and in alignment with PCS policies for what can be purchased with a PO, which I think we've made pretty expansive. You can also, you issue POs under existing contracts. We plan to load all of the master contracts into the system by vendor. That will happen before go live, but I just wanted to throw that out there that it's not just limited to goods. Sorry,
yep.
Please continue.
No, that's perfect, right? This system is really built for whenever we are buying products or services from a third-party vendor. So that's a good note to add. So from there, I'm going to go up into my cart where I can see these two items that I added. And I'll go ahead and click the checkout button. So, much like buying something online. So now as the browser, so by default, anybody on campus who's an employee on campus will have access as a browser. So when they're looking at this, they can look at where they want the bill to ship, where they want the product to ship. and those two things need to be filled out. But anything else that is on this screen can be left blank for the buyer to fill out. So if you don't know what index you need this to go to or what account this needs to go to and you're a browser, you can fill in the info that you know, but you don't have to fill anything out at this point. Similarly, we have this justification form that will have that we'll talk about a little bit, but also these may not be questions that the browser will know how to answer. So what I'm going to go ahead and do as the browser, their next step is they need to assign this to a buyer. So they would click this reassign button, and then they can assign it to any of the buyers that are kind of at the university. So you'll have to know who your buyer is to assign it to, but you can go ahead and just click that and then assign it to that individual. So now it's in Brett's inbox here, kind of waiting to be actioned further. So I'm going to take that next step and switch over to Brett and then show what it looks like from his screen. So on his screen, you'll see he has kind of these two action items up in his tasks, and this is the one that I'm going to click into, which is the one that Dylan just assigned to him. So he can click into this, and what he would do is go to the checkout button as well. So from here, he'll need to fill in the rest of the information. So he might he'll have an index that he'll need to fill in. If he knows what the index was named, but he doesn't remember the index number, I'm going to type in BAO, which will get us to all of our business affairs indexes. So you can search either by the index number or just type in the index number, or you can search by the description to get to where that is, and that will autofill the fund and the org and the program. These items off to the right, the fund type, the org 4 and org 5, those are all used for approval routing, so nothing that ever needs to be touched. As well as if you have a specific activity that you want to put in, you can put that in, or a location if that's relevant to this transaction. These can also be left blank. If they are left blank and they're part of an index, they will fill in on the banner side when this invoice posts to banner. So these will automatically fill in, but we're not including them as a default requirement, as oftentimes they change from what's in the index. So similarly with the account, is you can search, or if you just know what the account is that you want to use, I'm going to just use Office and Administrative Supplies. You can input that in. There's also functionality to be able to split between two indexes. You can add a split if you need to do that. I'm not going to do that in this case. And then there's also the option to take the information that was put in here and to copy it down to any other lines you have on the PO. And this will be part of our trainings, but just one thing to note, if you do copy down to a bunch, but then at the end line, you need to change it to something else, you always need to, you would clear the account code before you put it in a new index. That just helps smooth things out. So that's the kind of initial step of filling in the index that this is going to. If you have adjustments to quantity, or if you have to edit any of the lines as the buyer, you can do that through these buttons or on the screen here. So the next step that we'll look at is the justification form. So this is driven by other requirements that might be part of the PO. So the first is the question if this is over $50,000. If it is, there could be additional questions on contracts and things like that. So if you say yes, it will come down to additional questions that are coming through. In this case, no, it's not over $50,000. It doesn't have any U of O marks, which would route to other approvers that might be needed. And it's not truly an IS purchase for a mouse. It's not a software or other kind of technology that might need approval for from the IS team. So I'll say no there as well. And at this point, we're ready to check out. If you do have special things to add related to a justification, you can add notes up here. You can add attachments over here. So those things would all be kind of part of what would support the justification for the purchase order. So I'm going to go ahead and check out. And what this will do is this now creates the requisition. We can see that right now it's in a pending status. And as the buyer, when you're in this requisition, you can go and look and see who are the approvals that we need. So in this case, it will need this budget approval from the business affairs team. And right now in the test system, we have 3 people, including myself, as approvers. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is exit this switch and go back to myself. So I'm just going to go to the home page just to be from there. But what you can see is I actually have a few things that are in my inbox where there's tasks, which would be things like requisitions that are assigned to you, or carts to check out, or approvals in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this approval, and I could then review the details as the budget approver and see that, yes, this is reasonable. I knew that we needed some mice and keyboards to come to the office, so I'm going to go ahead and approve. If I'm approving, I don't have to put in a reason. I can put in a reason. If you decline, you have to put in a reason. It's always recommended that if you are a budget owner or another approver in the steps and all you need is some additional information added, declining will reject the entire requisition. So it's always best practice to reach out to the buyer and have them add that information and then come back to approve versus doing a full decline where possible. There's certainly cases where it's reasonable to decline. And if something is declined, it's easy to copy a requisition, make the changes, and then so you don't have to go through all of those creation steps of typing things in. So I'm going to go ahead and approve. And I think what we'll see, this is because I added the buyer status to Brett, but I didn't give him a self-approval level, that this is also going to go to somebody in the business affairs side to approve. So I'm going to have to switch into them real quick to approve that as well. So I will go admin and go to Lynn. Switch to her, and we'll go ahead and approve this one as well. That will get approved and approve. Okay.
Mind if I throw out here? Now that it's approved, there's a PO that's been created, and you can see back on the requisition page.
Let me get back to that requisition.
I think it's right there, 3.7. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see here that there's a requisition, and then there's a PO number, right? So one of the ways I like to think about this is that the requisition is the area in which you're managing the workflow for the transaction, right? And all the approvals are happening within that requisition. And then the EP number, the PO number, that is the product of that requisition, right? So you go to that, you're going to see the product. That's actually where the purchase order, you click on that document there, you can actually see the purchase order pop up. But the requisition, sometimes you're on screens and you see where the approvals are not there. It's like, if you're looking for the approval workflow, if you're looking for the workflow that got to the PO, the requisition page is where you want to look. If you're looking for the PO itself and the stuff that happens after it, receiving and invoicing, then the PO page is where you want to go for that. That's where you're doing the post-PO actions. It's just a good differentiator there that's new for us. Campus hasn't historically used the phrase requisition. It's very common on other campuses, but we just haven't used it. That is the process by which we request goods and services. A matter in the PCS portal, for instance, is also technically a requisition. for a more complex transaction generally. But I just want to throw that out there as new nomenclature that will change things for campus, but it's useful because there's going to be two numbers, and that's something we've got to think about too.
Yep.
Thanks, Eddie.
Yep. So the next step that would happen is we would have the product would arrive. So these a few days later, the mice and the keyboards arrive at the office. The next step is to receive the product. Now, who can do the receiving? It is the buyers, or it's the original person that did the request. So in this case, I can switch back into Dylan, and I can look at this this order, and he can say, yes, I received all 10 of each. So I'm going to go ahead and click this receiving button and say, yes, I did get 10 of them. And I received 10 of these as well. You can also, if you know you received everything, there's multiple lines on here. In this more actions, you can say receive all. So that is also an option. So we're going to go ahead and do that receiving.
You can also partially receive if you need to. If you only received 5, and you can invoice up to against those 5.
Or you only receive the mice and you haven't received the keyboards yet. You know, like any mix of that.
Totally.
Yep. So I will get back to this order. And so now we've done the receiving, we've done the PO, everything's approved. Next step would be the invoice comes in. So here I'm going to go ahead and invoice this order. So we can come in here. This is what invoice processors will do, is they would be able to, I think the first step is you always need to attach an invoice or some document that acts as the invoice. And I say acts as the invoice in the case where we have a PSC, a contract with an individual. They may not be sending us a true invoice, but there would be other documentation that you can upload to show why we're paying this invoice, or why we're paying this individual vendor. So I'm going to use my test invoice that I have here to upload, but the details that you would have here would all come from the invoice itself. So I'm just going to make up an invoice number here. The system does check, as does Banner, to make sure that we're not putting in a duplicate invoice number. So this has to be unique to the vendor. And it will stop you from processing the same document number twice, so that we don't inadvertently pay an invoice twice because 2 different people put them into the system. So the invoice date should be the invoice date that's on the invoice itself. So I'll put that as today. Payment terms can be defaulted. I think oftentimes it's defaulting to this net 45. Truly, this will use the default payment terms that we have in Banner when that's selected. So so that can be selected. And then you get to select what is on the invoice that you're paying. So all of this is kind of already filled out. We received all 20 of each. The invoice is also for all 20. The easy way is, if this is all for the same, then we go ahead and submit the invoice as well, which is what I'm going to do here. If there is a price difference or a quantity difference that is over the amount that's approved, this invoice will reroute back to budget approvers and to the AP team for an additional review to make sure we haven't reached other thresholds that need other approvals. But ultimately, that is, that's the step. So I would submit this invoice, and it was now successfully submitted, and it's in this accepted state. And I will refresh this one more time. So once this is accepted, this would be in a pending status if it was done before the receipt, and would tell that it's pending receiving. But once this is accepted, it will get sent to Banner. And in this case, It should just take a second. It will actually give you, I'll just click on invoices here because it can take a minute at times, but this reference right here, this is our Banner invoice number. So you can search for this in Banner and it will pull up the invoice for this associated purchase order and record the expense with the same focal elements that were entered on the PO.
Hey, Eddie, we do have one question in
Yes.
the Q&A. Christy, you want
Yeah.
to read it off?
Yeah, let me read that off for you. So this is from Cassie. It says, this creates extra work for the BAs, I'm assuming budget authorities, that was not necessarily with the previous system. Will they receive an email link to the new system when an approval is needed for easy approvals without having to learn the whole new system?
So
Yes.
yeah.
The answer is yes. You will receive an email for each approval that's requested from you, and you can click on an email, it'll take you directly to the approval. There's also, it's pretty easy if you have approvals. You notice that little check mark box in the top corner that Eddie was just pointing to.
Mm-hmm.
When you click on that check mark box, there's 2 tabs underneath it, and one of them is an approval tab. In the check mark, you can also find
one other user here because
that
I
makes sense.
believe there's some approvals that might be in here.
Oh yeah, great.
Because it's good to show what multiple approvals would look like. So let's say you have 11 approvals. What you can do is you can say view all, and it will list out these approvals. If you know what these transactions are, what the amounts are for, you don't necessarily have to go into the requisition. It just depends on what your knowledge is that's coming through, and you can click approve from here and put in your approval reason. Or you can click into the requisition itself, review all of the details on what's there to make sure that you have an understanding what that's for, and then you click approve at this point. So yes, it is at an individual PO level or a requisition level is where the approvals will happen. Which is different than what we have today, but it replaces the signing off at the invoice level because the approval up front takes care of the invoice so long as the invoice matches the purchase itself.
Yeah, so then it's not necessarily that this wasn't happening before. It's just we are managing how we record those approvals differently and officially, because the end user's there. We know that they approved it. It's in the system. Because I think there was the way that the approvals will be broken down is by org. So each org has named approvers. We're not going to be able to go down to a granular level where we're having every single a named person for every single index because that's an unmanageable amount of people. But we will be providing training to those folks that are, and I think Eddie has met with many of them, those people that are approvers that are approving in the system. But for the most part, it's a pretty straightforward process of going to that. You'll get the email to do it and so on. I think we have another question in the chat, Christy.
Yeah, so this one's from Nadine. Could you repeat the nomenclature definitions? First one was requisition number, and the second one was PO with an EP number.
Yeah, so requisition is the part of the process where we're managing the workflow, right? So a requisition is, hey, we are requesting these goods or services. And so that's the pre-issuance of the PO workflow. And that will be assigned a number because sometimes those items might not go through. The PO is the product of a requisition, and it will also be assigned a number. And there you can actually track both things in that. If you see the marketplace tab, there's a bunch of things on the left. There's an orders and a transactions box on the left column. And that takes you to, for instance, here we have, Eddie has the requisitions up. You can also see the orders. But yes, the requisition is the space where the workflow is recorded. And that, any approvals related to a transaction are recorded there. And then all of the other things are managed as well. I think a couple more questions before we keep going.
Just a couple more here. So from Michaela, to clarify, are people with level 1 contracting browsers or buyers, or is there some other way that this gets determined? Do people with level 1 need to send their carts to someone else to check out?
So people with level 1 will be buyers, not browsers. They will need their supervisor to approve that they can have buyer status in the system because we are increasing the authority from 10,000 to 25,000, and we wanted to make sure that teams are approving that. But yes, level 1 will give you buying power within the new Duck Depot for catalog and non-catalog up to 25,000, but that will be the extent of level 1 power, right? So you will not be able to use level 1 for outside, paper POs, PDF POs, or other forms. You'll still be able to do click-throughs when appropriate under level 1, and you would be able to approve the direct pay invoices under 10,000 for low-risk transactions, like you can do now. That will also be part of the workflow in the next part of the demo. I think one more question, Christy.
Yeah, we had a couple more come in, but I think we'll do one more question and then do a little bit more of the presentation and circle back to those questions if that works. And that was, what's the difference between tasks and approvals?
So
Yep.
if you go in, go ahead, Eddie. You can take this one.
Yeah, so what I'll say is tasks are items that are still outstanding. So if you are a buyer that kind of owns a purchase order that doesn't have receiving that's done yet, that will show up here. Incomplete requisition. So this is if a browser transferred a requisition to you, you can see what are the pending items that are in your box typically as a buyer that are incomplete requisitions. It could also be a browser who started one but hasn't transferred it yet. Can also be in their inbox as a task. Background jobs are for certain reports that are run or things where you're trying to export out of the system, pending invoices as well, and then quotes if you have access to get quotes from vendors through this system. Not part of what we're going to do today, but that's also an item there. The tasks that need more immediate action would be what's in the approvals, which will all just show a list of the items that are pending your specific approval, either routed through the budget authority, through the PCS authority, or through some of the other kind of specialized approvals that we have in the system.
So we have a couple more questions out there, but we want to keep on going through the demonstration. We will get to those questions after we're done with the demonstration. We've got them tracked. Don't worry, you'll get answers, and keep asking them if you have them.
Yep. So I think next part of the demonstration, what I'll show is for a non-PO payment. So let's say you have an invoice that needs to be paid, but you don't. But that was something that was purchased. It was a lower amount, under $10,000, that you don't necessarily have to have a PO, or is an invoice that's related to a PSC that was already approved, that's also not being set up as a PO, but is being paid because it's ready to go. So from that perspective, you actually start from the invoice. So I'm going to create an invoice. I'll use my same test upload for this, since we do still need a test or an item here. You would pick who the supplier is. I'll just go ahead and pick one here. You're not going to put in a purchase order because this is not related to an order yet. It's not an order that went out to the vendor. So you would put in what your invoice is. So that would be the invoice number on the invoice date. Again, payment terms can be the default payment terms on the vendor, which should populate here, or that net 45 works as well. The buyer, so this would be somebody who has authority to process these, will have this invoice buyer role, and that invoice buyer role allows you to create an invoice in this manner, and it will take you to a requisition screen next. So Bill 2, I'll still use Business Affairs, but this has all of our locations as options that are available. You would then input what your items are. So So in this case, you know, this is a cell tray that's being purchased, and we're getting 10 of them for $50 a piece. So from this point, you would go ahead and submit your invoice. And what you'll see is it takes you to the same kind of requisition screen that we had before. So so we will, there's some defaults here in the system. This is what's called a retrofit order. We typically, you won't have to know that name, but just so if you see it, that's what it's saying, is it's starting from an invoice. So it will give you the related invoice number that you can click through once this gets to the requisition status. By default, we're not going to send this PO to the vendor because we've already had an order. So we don't want to risk a duplicate order. So those things default when you're starting with an invoice. And again, you know, you could search for your index or just type what your index is, and what account you need. So I'll still use the same account in this demonstration. And you'll fill out the second justification form. So this is the invoice justification form. So what this one is looking for is, first, is there a contract associated with this already? So is there a PSC? If yes, it's going to ask you to put in that number and attach it to to the justification form. If
So-
not, yeah, go ahead.
I'll interject here. So if it's a PCS processed contract, all you need to do is enter the PCS number.
Right.
If it is a level 2 or departmental processed contract that wasn't touched by PCS, then you enter the name of the person who signed the contract and you upload the contract that was there to the justification attachments. This replaces the L2 archive process that we implemented as part of the portal. So we will archive those L2 contracts in this system as linked to the actual payment, and that's where we'll track those things.
Yep.
Sorry.
Nope, you're good. So since this didn't have a contract associated, it's asking, is it under $10,000? If yes, then it's just going to check and see, are there any other special circumstances that essentially add risk and would typically mean we need additional approvals, or that a PO should have been created. There's kind of different scenarios there. In this case, none apply. So I'm going to go ahead and check out. If this is over $10,000 and there's not a contract, it will route to PCS for you know, further action and approval. So yep. So we can check out here. And in a very similar vein as what we were seeing before, is there are approval steps. So in this case, I was the one that created the invoice. Because I created the invoice, I can't also be the budget approval for this. So I'm kind of blocked out of it. So I would have to switch into one of these other users to like another approver on within that budget authority group can approve it. So I'll go ahead and approve this. So similarly, right, they'll review that. They'll have a link to the invoice itself, so you can look at the invoice if you need to, just depending on what the circumstances are. And then ultimately this gets approved, and we can see now that this invoice has been approved. So this still creates a purchase order, but it's not a purchase order that gets sent to the vendor because this was starting from the invoice. So it's kind of already after the fact from the service being performed. There's also not a goods receipt process, because the assumption is when you're processing this invoice, you already know that that service was performed or that the goods were received. So it skips those steps and just goes through the different approval processes that are required based on the you know, the items within the order itself. I think with that, a couple other notes that I'll make is if you do create a purchase order, so not starting from the invoice, but if you do create a purchase order, that purchase order will create an encumbrance within Banner. And that encumbrance will then help for people running reports on available budget. It will reduce from the available budget since it is a commitment to purchase what was purchased. When the invoice is processed or the PO is closed, it will release that encumbrance. Yes.
Only thing I'll add is, we didn't go through the catalog process, but if you're doing a Duck Depot Classic style catalog order, all those vendors are set up to e-invoice. And so the only action you'll need to take to pay those vendors is mark the receive button.
Yep.
There's a three-way match process where the system matches the PO that was issued to the invoice that was sent. And if those within tolerances match, then it will just automatically go out to pay net one day, so long as they all sign up to SUA, which they're required to do. So those are all things to be mindful of.
Yep.
So I think we have a few more questions. Do we want to go through those questions and I can finish the rest of the slide deck? Let's do that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yep.
So the first one's from Charlene. Are you adding only department heads and directors as budget authorities, or are you asking about delegated budget authority for business managers to approve in lieu of the department head or director?
Yes, so I've worked with the budget heads, typically at kind of an org level 3, level 4 level to get the flow of where they want approvals to be routed. So oftentimes, if we think of CAS as an example, is each of them are routing to the appropriate ASU for approval from the ASU lead. In certain other circumstances, it might route to a certain manager at an org level 5 level, so something that's a little bit more granular. We're not routing at an index level or at a individual org level. The reason for that is there's too much change that can happen within there, and that just presents opportunity for approvals to get missed within the routing. So there will be, I'm sure, as we get into the system and we're having a lot more volume within the system, there can be some tweaks to how those budget approvals work. I'll continue to work with the lead budget owners on how to best get that routing in an appropriate manner, but I have been working with them to make sure that we're routing it as best as we can.
Thank you. Next question's from Elise. Can an approver route the requisition back to the initiator for changes to be made as needed?
So they can send a comment. It won't go necessarily back to the buyer. If you decline within an approval, it basically cancels that entire requisition, and that requisition then needs to be started over if there's changes. If they send a comment on the changes that are needed, the buyer can go in and make those changes. As well as the approvers in those steps, if they need to change the account code that it's hitting or something of that nature, they can actually do that as part of their approval step. It might reset the approval to go back to the beginning, but it is something that can be changed within a requisition.
And a reason for that might be like, hey, if you change, an index, for instance, or something along those lines, and it needs to go to a different group to be approved, then that's why it resets the approval flow when you make those changes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Next one's from Catherine. Will L1CA still be able to purchase from other platforms such as Amazon after the expansion goes live?
So the answer to that is yes for Amazon. And in fact, the way Amazon works right now is it's a P-card platform, right? So P-card users and P-card, right? So That's not changing or going away. You don't need to have L1CA to use a P card to buy goods. You do need to have L1CA to use a P card to buy other things like going through click-throughs or software or other things like that. But if you are using your L1CA to buy goods with a P card, either in the world at Costco or online and e-commerce sites that are not integrated into Duck Depot, then you can do that. And that remains the same also for Amazon. Our hope is that we will integrate the Amazon Punchout into the system, but that requires Amazon to play ball with us and meet our requirements. And they are a notoriously challenging company to deal with on that front. So that's just a thing to be mindful of. We're trying to push to make that happen next year, but they want to challenge us on what payment method we use, et cetera. So yes, if you have a P card and you're a P card user, you can continue to use your P card out in the world. The Duck Depot cards, on the other hand, are going to be decommissioned. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the slides coming up.
Perfect. Thank you. This is from Cassie. How do we know who will be approving our carts if it's not necessarily the budget authority assigned to our individual indexes?
So those are assigned at like as Eddie mentioned, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th level. And so if you are, for instance, provide service by FAS, it'll probably be, business managers in FAS that are approving those indexes. It's going to vary by unit, right? I think some units will probably have a set of approvers for their org, depending on their size. Some units, it's just going to be one approver or two approvers if it's a smaller size group. And it also will depend on the volume. So you can check in the requisition under the approval section. I don't know, Eddie, if you want to show that in the screen. Under the approvals tab right here, you can see who was asked to approve for a budget or authority perspective for your particular transaction. And if your units has questions or need to add approvers, reach out to Eddie and I, and we can work with you to make sure that that's happening.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. If it's this is from Janelle. If it's an internal PO under 10,000, do we attach the internal PO to the paying or entering an invoice for payment?
Yes, this is an interesting question. I struggle to understand what an internal PO is, but what I'm assuming it is actually a requisition, right? A document that your end user is using to make a request of you to buy a thing. You do not need to attach that to this if you are making a payment and it's under $10,000. If it's some non-Duck Depot PO that you're actually sending to the vendor, then you will not have the authority to do that moving forward. All POs must be issued through this system. So if you are issuing a PO to the vendor based on some form that is either the PCS form, right, which is the only, technically, if you have level 1, the only PO form that you have the authority to issue. If you're issuing it on some other department level form, again, that is not a valid PO now, and it will not be a valid PO moving forward. But I think one of the things that's been challenging is the campus has used the word, some parts of campus has used the word purchase order or the phrase purchase order to describe what actually is a requisition. And so that creates additional confusion.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca has a question about, it looks like maybe a two-part question or two questions. Could you clarify when SPS is involved in approvals for grant-funded purchases? Can we manually enter an approver if a standard approver is out of the office for vacations?
Yes, so SPS, we are working with SPS on their approval workflow. We might up the dollar amounts, but if a grant index is used and it exceeds thresholds, then it will be automatically routed to SPS for approval. But we're in talks with them about increasing that dollar amount from what it is now. So that may happen coming soon. The next, if you cannot manually enter an approver if the standard approver is out of the office, but when approvers are out of the office, they can go to their profile and set a delegate.
Yep. So yeah, so I can say that I'm unavailable for, a planned vacation, and then I can select who I would want my proxy approver to be. So, and it could be anybody that's in the system, can be assigned as your proxy for the time that you're set as away. This can also, if there's a unexpected absence, this is something that can be assigned by one of the community admins as well.
Thank you. All right. Audrey has 3 questions. We currently have the ability in Banner to select the transaction date so the expenses post to a specific budget period. Will Duck Depot offer similar flexibility in payment terms, specifically a transaction date or a specified date? Will existing vendors in Banner be automatically imported into Duck Depot, or will they need to be re-entered? And then the third question, what payments will be processed through FAAINVE Banner directly and not this system?
Yep. So I'm going to start with the last question first. So for items that are within Duck Depot, it's really geared towards third-party purchases, services or goods. Yeah, purchases of services or goods from third parties. Outside of that, we'll have expense reimbursements, any payments that are going to employees or student loan refunds. Those types of transactions are still going to happen within Banner and would use that FAA, INVE. The would go straight through Banner to be entered. For your other questions, and sorry, Christy, can you remind me on the specifics of the first 2? So
Yeah. Will existing vendors in Banner be automatically imported into Duck Depot, or will they need to be re-entered?
Yes. So for the vendors, we have flagged an initial set of vendors based on their activity over the last 18 months to come into Duck Depot. If you have a vendor that is that is set up within Banner that just needs to come over to Duck Depot, you can email the AP team using the AP BAO email address, and it's a quick change in the vendor profile to have them come into Duck Depot. So it is a automatic process once we flag them to come in. We didn't want to bring all vendors in, and also any vendor, because we do have vendors that used to be students or employees that have a 9-5 number. By default, we're not bringing those in automatically either, so those will need to be requested, but they can be added in as well.
So we have a couple more questions, but we have a few more slides
Yes.
to go over that might answer some of the questions, and then we will, work through those questions. And I don't have a hard stop at 10, so if I can stay on a little bit later to continue to ask questions, if people need to do that after 10. So I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen again and go through the remainder of the slides. So. Here is, I just want to, this is a quick thing. Here's a timeline. And I think a lot of you don't care about a lot of the details of this. We've been working on this for a long time. But the real key thing to know here is that the system is going to go live on November 17th. And so we're close to there right now. The system is actually already live. And there is a pilot group of testers out there that are able to place orders on the system. And that's currently happening. We have about 100 or so live orders. I think a little more than 100 or so live orders that have been processed. And probably some portion of that is invoices that have been processed as well. There's been a couple very prolific power users. Shout out to Jeff, who's been very, very prolific. And so I appreciate that group. They've been doing a lot of work and helping us learn more about the system. So that is really ready for go live. We are going to continue to add a few groups in between now and when we go live. to start getting more people used to the system as sort of a slow rollout. Then there are a couple of things that we still need to get done before we go live. But we are working on those things, especially getting all of the punch-out vendors up and going and ready to be live on November 17th. So we are offering a bunch of trainings. The primary way we're doing training for this is going to be self-driven. So we are creating a set of knowledge-based articles that will be available in the PCS Help Center to cover all the different processes. Christy has been working really hard on that. We'll also publish a user guide alongside that. And then we're going to have self-service learning resources for just-in-time learning. Those are sort of training, videos or shows that take you through step-by-step what to do. And we're hoping to publish those as well. We found that a lot of people want to be doing training on their own time and not really driven by different training sessions. And these trainings are really focused on how to use the system. The one thing I'll note is that you'll still need to go through the PCS training for L1 and L2 if you're trying to become a buyer on the system and you haven't gotten that certification yet. And that training will continue to be offered in person on a monthly basis. And I think there will also be continue to be an AP invoice type training that's happening as well. But our trainings for this new system are new are really going to be about how to use the system, not as much about the policies that underpin why the system was built the way it is. And one of the reasons for that is that we've built the system to sort of ensure that policies followed for the most part. And so for us, the key element is all of you, especially those that have L1, those policies already. There's not a lot changing except for that increase in authority. And so really it's about how to use the system, where to go to get information, which buttons to click, et cetera, et cetera. We're also going to host office hours post go live, and we'll post when those are shortly. But our plan is for that maybe 2 or 3 week period after we go live. So that November 17th is a Monday that week. And then the next week is the Thanksgiving week. So we'll have a shortened week, and then maybe some few days into the following week, we'll have daily office hours. After that, then we'll go to sort of a weekly cadence, probably through January. And then after that, we'll move into a monthly cadence that aligns with the current process we have for Duck Depot and P-Card. We are going through this pilot process now, and we have made a few updates to the system based on feedback we've received from the pilot participants. Like I mentioned before, we really want to have this on-demand training so you can go get it whenever you need it, and it's going to come in the form of those knowledge-based articles and the self-service learning resources that are just in time, so you can just watch the video and get the information you need as you need it. And then, of course, we're available at PCS, and we have our team is here. Christy is our go-to Duck Depot person, and you can reach questions for us at the duckdepot@uoregon.edu email address. That's not changing. Similarly, if you have questions related to invoicing process or integrations with Banner or other things like that, then AP is your go-to resource there. One of the things I'll note is we will have a need to, as Eddie mentioned, add vendors that are in Banner but not in Duck Depot. If you need to do that, you can send the request to AP BAO at UOregon to make that happen. And then the other thing to note is that there are some vendors that are in Duck Depot now that don't have email addresses because there was no email address for them in Banner. And if you come across that scenario, you can email APBAO and they will add email address in Banner, which will then populate in Unimarket so that you can get that information to the vendor. Then last slide. Like I mentioned, we're going to go live on November 17th. For the legacy processes, right? So there's 4 legacy processes that are being replaced by the system. The PDF POs, right? So that's just the PO form that's out there on PCS's website. Banner POs and invoices, and then Duck Depot Classic. Those are all going to be sunsetting between go live and around mid-December. For Duck Depot Classic in particular, we will turn off ordering functions shortly after we go live, making sure that we have all the right punch outs up. And then you'll still be able to access Duck Depot Classic, but you won't be able to order on that system. If you have right now orders that you want to place in Duck Depot Classic that are back ordered, I recommend that you wait a little bit and then place those orders in the new Duck Depot, because the other thing we have to do alongside the Duck Depot Classic decommissioning is to decommission the Duck Depot cards. And if there are lagging back-ordered items that won't be charged against those cards until they're shipped, we want to make sure all of that closes out before the cards are decommissioned and turned off, so that we're not having charges to those cards go out into the ether. I suspect that will still happen for 5 or 10 transactions, and if that does happen, we'll work with you to make sure the vendor's paid on your normal P card or some other process. But it's just a thing to be mindful of. So like if you need to place orders in Duck Depot Classic and you see an item that's back ordered, I would just hold off. The other systems, similarly, we will cut those over and turn those off. The invoicing function will not necessarily turn off because, as Eddie mentioned, there's going to be other processes, payee type transactions, reimbursements, refunds, et cetera, that will still happen. The paying of royalties to folks with the banner invoice functions, but those are not vendor relationships or supplier relationships, and so therefore they would still happen outside of the system. The new Duck Depot is really for third parties that are providing goods and services to the University of Oregon. We're hoping to release all the training materials shortly. Look for those popping up in the next few weeks. And like I mentioned before, if you come across a vendor without an order email address, please reach out to APBAO and we can get that email address added so that the vendor can receive those orders. And with that, I think we have a few more questions to go through, and I'm happy to stay on to keep working through these questions until we've got them all resolved. But that is the end of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anything to add, Eddie, before we jump into the questions?
Nope, I think I'm good to go with questions.
Yeah,
awesome.
Great.
So the first one from Julie is, will reminders go out to approvers so there are no delays in processing?
So approvers will get an email requesting that they approve. I don't know if there is a follow-up reminder ping that occurs after that. Our hope is that my recommendation, it's actually really easy to do approvals in the system. I've done a ton of them. And so for those approvers that are getting a fairly high volume, my recommendation is to just, if you know that you have approvals out there, setting a time, on a daily basis or every couple of days or whatever else, to go in and click approve on the transactions that are coming to you, 10 minutes at lunchtime or at the end of the day. That would be the way I would go about managing those approvals.
Perfect. Thank you. Lisa asked, do you need L1CA to pay invoices in the system?
So you do not need L1CA to process invoices. There is an invoice creator role, and those that have banner invoice authority will have the capacity to approve or create invoices in the system. The invoices will still workflow to a buyer, especially because for those under $10,000 transactions, you'd still would need a buyer to approve under their level 1 approval. And so that workflow will happen, but you do not need to have L1 to create the invoice for those non-PO invoices in particular, or even to upload an invoice that's related to a purchase order, a non-catalog purchase order that went out that the vendor doesn't have the invoicing functions, but you would just be doing the PO flip in that case.
Thank you. From Marina, we currently have the option to upload invoices via AppWorks to Banner for large batches of invoices. Is this still a possibility with the new system?
So there's
Is this
not.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Well, I was going to say there's not a invoice upload functionality in the same way into Unimarket. I think it might depend on what invoices you're uploading via AppWorks. If they're it might depend what they're for on whether they actually belong within here within Unimarket or Duck Depot. So yes, the other option is potentially if you do have batches of invoices that need to be processed, to process those as kind of a singular transaction. I think it just depends on how those need to be paid. So if you do have situations like that and you want to work with us on that, feel free to reach out to me, and we can take a look and see what the best way to approach that is.
Yeah, it really is dependent on, if it's like, for instance, you have 5 invoices from the same vendor you want to pay at the same time and they're all non-PO invoices, then you could upload multiples of them. But if they're related to a PO in the system, then it's one invoice. They have to match, and the system actually matches them together as part of the process. We want to get as many of those vendors on e-invoicing as possible, but there's going to be a bunch of them that don't have e-invoicing. So and of course, for the catalog vendors, you're not going to have to worry about any of that. It will just be clicking receive.
Perfect. Thank you. Stephanie asks, it was mentioned that the buyer and person who placed the order are the people who are able to mark the items as received. Is it possible to have accountants or others in the department able to mark orders as received?
If they are an L1, I think they can mark received, right, Eddie? But if they are not the original initiator, then they don't have the capacity to mark as received. But I think it's also something we need to think about, like how you are managing that in your individual department. I think it's something we can look at if, for instance, there's other L1s that are in the department that could do that, or who is doing the initiation of the request in the system. I think one of the big things that will happen across campus that there is flexibility on is some units are going to have end users actually do requisitions in the system and express demand through the system. Other end users are going to have another system that's like, a lot of these big shared services group have a ticketing system that feeds in for every single type of service they could possibly provide. FAS is, I think, an example of this. CAS and CBSO are also heading in that direction. And so in that case, I think really those shared services groups are the ones that are going to be, really interacting with the system, and those end users aren't going to touch it as much. And so then those folks are going to be the ones that are doing the receiving, and it really just depends on whether they're playing the role of buyer or browser and whether they're connected to the transaction or not.
Thank you. Kevin has a question is, we have a service contract PCS already worked out for us for services that will be completed on 11/19. Will we need to switch to Duck Depot to process that after it's completed, or can that still be done in Banner?
So after 11/19, I think in that situation, you're talking about paying the invoice related to that contract. There's no contract action you need to take, but at 11/19, if you're paying an invoice related to that contract, you would process that invoice in the new Duck Depot in a similar way, just like if you were processing an invoice in Banner, except you're following the Duck Depot process. You would upload that as part of the non-PO invoice process, and all you'd need to do is enter in the PCS contract number into the field in order to make the payment. You don't need to upload the contract.
Perfect. Thank you. Jolynn asks, will subaward invoice payments be made through the system or via FAAINVE?
I think that's one of those where it's not truly a third-party purchase in the same way when we're dealing with subawards that I think can flow through Banner, but it also is there's a possibility to use Unimarket to be able to track those, create potentially a and encumbrance on that fund if you want, that could be released as you're paying funds out for the subaward. But that's I think a discussion we can have on whether that belongs. But Greg, would you agree that those aren't necessarily? Yeah, those.
I agree. I
can-
think subawards, yeah, it's like student stipends, subawards. Those are not third-party vendors that are providing services to the institution, and that would not be within the system. That would be in Banner.
Okay, perfect. We are sitting at 11 minutes after our time. I think we got the bulk of the questions. I'm going to take down any remaining questions. It looks like there's maybe one in here. And so we can respond directly to those if we didn't have a chance to address your questions today. And so I will let the Greg and Eddie do their closing remarks.
I will, just to address one thing. I know we had mentioned that there will likely be requests to get vendors that are in Banner added to Unimarket, as well as getting email addresses added to those vendors. If you do send the request to APBAO to that site, if you could please include both the vendor name and the vendor number, that will help kind of speed along that process instead of having to search at which vendor it might be. So, so please include both of those when you do have those requests.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for joining and staying on. I mean, 9 of you are still on here even after we've gone over time, so I very much appreciate that. Like Christy mentioned, we'll put this recording up hopefully in the next week or so, and you should be able to see it in the Duck Depot site with the other recordings we have up there. Reach out if you have questions. You know, we're really excited to implement this. I think it's going to be a big improvement for campus. And yeah, thank you all for working with us as this big change occurs. 'Cause I know it's a big change for everyone.
All right, thank you. I'm going to
Thank
go
you.
ahead and end the event.